Ron Orr to our topic tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. What a long introduction. Wow. But I'm really glad to be here. I really appreciate the invitation, and thanks to the university and staff and the Small Business Center for considering me on that. I thought maybe I should actually begin by just giving you a little bit of my own business background, because I'll refer to it as I go through a couple of times. I started out working for others, and that's a point worth noting. And then I took some focused education along the way. So as has already been said, I got a carpenter's ticket, and then I took a Canadian Homes Owners Association course offered quite a few years ago for a housing professional, which really focused mostly on business management side of housing, how to actually create a business of it. I think that's important because after restaurants and some service type businesses, small contracting companies are amongst the highest level of business failures in Canada. The reality is that tradesmen might know their trade, but in order to run a business, it takes another whole suite of learning in order to be able to do that well. And so I needed to acquire that knowledge base as well, and I found that instruction that I got to be extremely helpful. So what I did is I sourced and I sold cabinets primarily. I did all the renovation work that leads to one thing after another sort of thing. I did some small infill subdivision work, custom house building. Never really had more than 5 employees, so I guess you would say I'm what would be called a micro business in Canada. And then after building it up for about 5 years, somebody wanted to buy the cabinet piece of it from me, and I sort of sensed, looking at my community and the economy, that things might be heading toward a bit of a downturn. And so I sold the business out at that point in time. But I'm glad to be able to say that it still exists. Actually, I was there 2 years ago, and it's still operating under another person, and it fills a local need, and I think that's the key. And then over the years, I've built up a small portfolio of residential rental properties, which have sort of been my current business experience. For this as well, I took some courses, got some special education in management and also in landlord-tenant law in Alberta at Frederick College, and my construction skills allow me to do the maintenance work and that kind of stuff effectively. So I really don't know anything about retail and some other business types, and I'll only speak out of my own experience, but I have had a fair bit of experience in a small business setting. And my father also was a very engaged entrepreneurial type mind. I grew up watching him start businesses and sell them. He started a number of local businesses, and then he actually started 3 mining businesses on the Vancouver Stock Exchange years ago. I remember going with him on some of those trips and worked on some of those sites with him. And my son, I suppose, is what you might call the ultimate entrepreneur. He lives in Silicon Valley, California. He does high-tech venture cap startups. I think he's on his 4th company now. And we often talk, and I've learned a lot from him in that sort of hyper business environment of Silicon Valley. So that's a bit of my business connections, I guess. I think we have to acknowledge that in the current times, in the difficulties that we're facing here in Alberta, a lot of people may be discouraged about the future of business in Alberta. And there is a lot of doom and gloom out there, and quite frankly, some of it's very justified. I'd encourage some of you who may not be aware of the Alberta Economic Dashboard is a good place that you can go to look at, to monitor how the province is doing, how some of the sectors in the province are doing, what the activity is. And I see from that just today it states that business incorporations are actually up by 10%, but on the other side, business bankruptcies in Alberta are up by 50%. So it's a dangerous time. There are serious risks out there, and yet there are great opportunities as well afoot. And I'd like to suggest that there are some bright spots, even right here in the Lacombe area, right within this riding. As you look beyond the carnage, there are challenges that always create opportunities. And so locally, I just spoke just a week ago with an agricultural real estate brokerage firm. They're having their best year ever this year. There's opportunities in enhanced oil and gas recovery related to the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line. I had a tour out at their site just east of town here, south of Clyde. They're drilling wells. They're looking to expand their network into other regions as well. There are huge opportunities there with them. There are some restaurants that are doing well. Several weeks ago, I just stopped in, had a tour, actually took one of our, actually I guess it was our premier, out to one of our local greenhouses here. It's actually probably the largest construction project going on in central Alberta right now. They've got 40 men out there working. They're putting another 13 acres under glass in greenhouse to sell to Alberta, to Edmonton. Huge opportunities there. There are oil service companies that are transitioning and thriving and finding ways to make it work. There are new and expanded chicken barns and other agricultural facilities happened just this year. Alberta Milk is in the process of building a $50 million processing plant right on the south edge of Lacombe. So there's actually lots happening. There are opportunities out there, and that's why my subject today is what are the opportunities in 2020 Alberta? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about opportunities, talk my way around that. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about the entrepreneur, what kind of person will be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And then because I was asked to also include, and I work for government, I serve government, to also include some of the resources and connections that might be beneficial to you through government here in Alberta. So that's kind of where I'm going. Let me kind of set the context, I guess, as I begin to think about opportunities. Small business is the backbone of our Canadian economy. Small business is literally big business in Canada. On a Canadian scale, 98% of all businesses have fewer than 100 employees. That's the majority of the economic business in this country. It is the economic engine, and its success is vital to our prosperity. And that's why I say small business will continue. There will be opportunities in every economy. There's over 1 million small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada. More than half of them, 55%, latest figures I could find, have fewer than 4 employees. I was one of them years ago. If you're a small business, you shouldn't feel bad about that, because you know what? You're part of the big group that drives the economy of this country. Small businesses employ almost 70% private sector workers. That's a huge figure. Small businesses are responsible for 70-some%, almost 80% of all jobs created in the private sector. About 100,000 jobs a year plus. And small and medium-sized enterprises represent 54% of the economic output produced by the business sector. And when you think about it, small businesses in that respect are going against the Suncors and the big banks and all of the really big corporations, but small business operators produce 54% of the economic output. These are amazing figures when you really think about it, the impact and the influence that small businesses have. And that's why they're important. That's why they will continue to prosper in our country. And we have to continue to have small businesses, and we recognize that. But there is the challenge that only that only half of the new businesses will survive 5 years. That isn't necessarily a bad figure though, because it indicates the transition and the fluid nature of business, and the importance of being able to pivot when necessary and change things. Particularly in Alberta, about the same numbers apply. 98% of businesses are the small businesses. Alberta actually has one of the highest per capita numbers of businesses per 1,000 people. I think there's almost 50 small businesses per 1,000 people in Alberta. Only Prince Edward Island has a higher number than we do. So to summarize, the great majority of businesses are small businesses. The largest job creators and employers are small businesses combined. Small businesses in Alberta are a huge contributor to our provincial GDP, and much of the innovation and tech development comes from these small businesses. And I think there's something even more important than that I always like to emphasize. And that is that much of the glue that holds communities and societies together comes from small business owners. They give leadership of civic and nonprofit organizations. They donate funds for these organizations to operate. To enter the world of small business really is much more than just finding a way of making a living or making a profit. It's about learning, it's about leadership in your community, it's about serving the public good, about social service, because you provide essential goods and services that make life itself possible in our communities. Small business is the answer to the essential needs that people have, and they are the lifeline to employment for many people. That's a really important part of small business that doesn't always get voiced, but I think we need to remember. And as long as people have essential needs, there will be opportunities here in Alberta even. But it will take creative, visionary, persistent people to find the right goods to deliver and the right way to offer service. So where do we find opportunities in our world? And I want to speak a little bit bigger right now, a little bit bigger perspective. 100 years ago and more, we went through what everybody studies and understands as the Industrial Revolution. Probably not many people realize that today we are in a revolution that is just as powerful and going to change our world just as much as that revolution did, and it's the tech revolution. Technology is changing the way everything in our world operates, and technological disruption is going to create incredible business opportunities across every sector that you can possibly imagine. Every single sector will be reimagined and recreated and redelivered through technology. Blockchain software and distributed ledgers are true revolutionary changes in our society. Digital currency is coming. The Bank of Canada, every other major country in the world is studying how to introduce a digital currency. Smart contracts are going to be embedded in almost everything that you deal with. The record keeping, the reporting, the way these business services are delivered are going to create massive opportunity for people who are alert and finding ways to offer those services and take advantage of those opportunities. Manufacturing and all industrial activity is being transformed through robotics machines, through machine learning. There are opportunities to manufacture. This kind of stuff is coming even right into Lacombe here. I've toured factories where they're doing things in ways that would never have been done even 20 years ago. Agriculture is becoming digitized. The most recent thing I just read, you can now buy a product out of Holland where the sprayers, the agricultural sprayers for herbicides, they put a visual sensor on every spray sensor along the length of that thing. The sensor reads what's in front of it, and if it sees a weed, it turns the sprayer on, and when it goes past the weed, it turns the sprayer off. It only sprays the weed, not the whole field anymore. They're saving 80 to 90% of the chemicals, which is a big cost, just by this one technological evolution. Digitize everything. It's going to happen. Data is everything. You know that even the old software we used to use up until a couple of years ago for driver's exams was actually written by a local individual from here, and through sales and business transaction contract stuff, it no longer is. But a local individual made a business, and for quite a few years, he ran the software that delivered driver's exam scheduling and booking for Alberta. That's an opportunity that he saw and he seized. Everything is changing through innovation. And that's where a lot of the new business opportunities will arise, where new ways of doing things will completely displace the old ones. And the key is that it's done with new approaches. There's also another part that I think leads to a lot of opportunities, and that's regulation. We live in a world where government creates fair playing field, where government creates the regulation that governs the world of business. And government programs are always changing. And government programs are often offering new opportunities that I would encourage people to be paying attention to, because there are doors that can open for you there. So let me just outline a couple of these things for you today, because I was asked to include these. Alberta Innovates, for instance, just recently announced $750 million coming from Emissions Reduction Alberta for research into carbon capture, usage, and storage technology. The goal here is, and it's happening around the world, Europe is doing a lot of this, other places, but the intent here is to turn captured carbon, which now is greenhouse gases and and a huge polluter, to turn that into usable products. Let me give you a quick example. In Calgary, there's a company that takes that captured carbon from industrial emitters and it converts it into nano-sized carbon tubes. These carbon tubes are the strongest thing known to man, stronger than steel. They're going to be able to apply these things to all kinds of different products, into clothing to make it stronger, to make it literally bulletproof. They're going to put it into plastics to strengthen plastics. They're going to put it into concrete to strengthen concrete and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of concrete. Here's a whole bunch of spin-off opportunities that are going to come out of that somebody's going to seize and turn into a small business. The Alberta Carbon Conversion Tech Center in Calgary actually lists licensing opportunities for new developments that they've come up with that people can license and create a small business of. These are opportunities on the website waiting for somebody to pick them up. Government has also recently introduced $2.1 million to our colleges, Red Deer, Olds, and SAIT, for innovative research into things like 3D printing, all kinds of agricultural applications, construction applications, lots of sort of more, I don't know, technical or industrial type uses. We just recently committed $175 million to the Alberta Enterprise Corporation, which will help to attract venture funds or venture capital funds for new startup businesses in Alberta. New startup businesses that have need of funding for angel investing could contact them and see if they would fit into that stream. We've just given $9 million for artificial intelligence research in the universities, and we have a wonderful world-class artificial intelligence research here in the province, machine learning. There will be business opportunities come out of that. The Innovation and Employment Grant, which will begin January 1st coming, provides companies with a grant up to 20% of qualifying research and development expenditures. So all kinds of new ideas out there. There's opportunities to get assistance with that and to develop that into a business. I'd also like to suggest some other things, though, that are not government related. And I don't think sometimes people realize this, but when I talk to business owners, it does come up. The Canada-US dollar exchange rate creates a great opportunity for Alberta exports. Many small business owners don't think that they can do export, but there's lots of help out there, and I actually think you can, and I'll tell you a story a little bit later about one that did. And I would say on that too, that Canada's reputation internationally is highly regarded in very many products. And you know, if you connect with the right people and you go to some of these places, whoops, computer's acting up. People around the world want to do business with Canadians. They trust you, they like you. There are huge opportunities to be had in those opportunities. I would also say that there's still great opportunities in Alberta's natural resources. You know, when you think about it, Alberta is one of the most blessed regions of the world. I mean, not only do we have our golden egg of oil and gas resources, but you know, we actually are one of the best places in Canada for wind and solar. Not every place will work for wind. There's a whole bunch of it in Alberta because of the mountains that will. We have some of the most sunshine hours in the country. Solar will work here. It is working here. Geothermal heat along the edge of the foothills of the mountains. There are at least 2 serious companies that I know of in this province that are creating brand new ways of doing geothermal and creating new ventures out of that. We have incredible geography for film and tourism. I've talked with lots of the people in that through some of my previous roles as an MLA here. Forests, we have vast forests to the north. The opportunities for secondary businesses, value-added businesses to those forest products is huge. Our agricultural land, another great resource for business development. And then we have a wonderful diversity of wildlife, more than most other provinces too, because we have such a diversity of geography. And the tourism, hunting and fishing, photographic, even just sightseeing wildlife, care of wildlife. All these create business opportunities. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of things that are just given to us in this province that if we capitalize on them, the opportunities for business are there. I think it's important to think about what are the fastest growing sectors, and I tried to do some research on that for you. From Canadian government, actually, oh, I have the thing here somewhere. I'll find it in a minute for you. But some of the fastest growing areas of small business development are information and cultural industries, professional science and technical services. If you've got those kinds of skills and knowledge, you can certainly create a business out of it. Construction and manufacturing, of course. Old standbys are still generating considerable growth. Agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, we've already mentioned those. Administrative support, waste management service, remediation services, all of those are still experiencing strong growth opportunities there. Management of companies and enterprises, finance and insurance. These are some of the fastest growing areas, and just about every other sector you look at, there are opportunities for the right person with the right knowledge and the right commitment. I would say, though, that it's important when you try to figure out where the opportunities are, that you really need to evaluate your own skills and knowledge. Do what you know how to do. And I think that'll come up a little bit more when we talk about the kind of person who makes a good entrepreneur. Do what you understand. If you launch out into something absolutely new, you've got a huge learning curve in front of you, and your likelihood of failure will increase. Ask yourself, what do people really need? Identify those needs, test them, meet the real need. It's a formula to win. How can you add value to people's lives? And I got to caution you, though, sometimes what you think adds value to their lives and what they think adds value to their lives doesn't always agree. It might shock you. So you need to test those ideas that the customer actually wants what you want to offer them. Of course, there's the franchise advantage as a way to approach small business. Franchise, and by the way, Albertans have the highest percentage, are the highest percentage of franchise owners in the country. Franchises give you an instant business, so to speak, and they also will deliver to you a lot lower failure rate than independently started businesses. Essentially, what you're doing with a franchise is you're buying or renting an innovation or a system that's proven to be successful. So that's one of the ways. Let's talk about tourism and hospitality. Tell you a little story. A few years ago, I met a couple in Edmonton when I was up there doing my MLA work, and they said to me, oh, every year we take a weekend and we make a getaway to, not Mexico, not Arizona, but Lacombe. And my ears picked up. Why would you make a weekend getaway every year to Lacombe? And they said, it's beautiful. The streets, the murals, the fields, the walking trails, the arts and cultural events. And you know, a light went off for me. Lacombe sits within an hour drive of a market of over 1 million people. And yet, who in Lacombe really sees that, or who actually really markets to them or targets what they want? There are a few businesses who have done a little bit of advertising there, and they tell me they've gotten good responses. But what if businesses got together, pooled their efforts in terms of tourism and hospitality? The challenge, of course, is, though, that learning to create a product or service and connect into a really effective marketing chain or a marketing system is difficult. It's a big challenge. And very few small businesses, particularly rural, I think, and I've had quite a bit to do with rural small businesses. I used to attend the rural business fair every year in Camrose, which is now not running anymore. But there are very few rural small businesses that are professional enough to offer the high-class kind of service that tourists, and especially international tourists, expect and demand. There are a few, and the ones who really up their game, who are really the very best, will succeed. There are some ranch experiences like that. We've got a corn maze. There's business in Red Deer was offering tours to the Rocky Mountains. There are some, but I think there's a huge opportunity there that gets overlooked. What about manufacturing? There's a lot of that in the oil field. We have considerable ag implement manufacturing facilities in this country. Pardon me, in this writing. I mean, There's everything from making wooden pallets to fish hooks being manufactured right here in Lacombe. A little story a couple of years ago. I happened to be out east of Lacombe, actually close to Nevis, and I was going to an old farmhouse with a fair bit of junk all over the yard, and a woman had set up an online business, a sales business in that rural small farm place, and she was manufacturing baby wraps and other knitted products. She literally had they didn't live in this house. She literally had every room in that old house set up with knitting machines and people working in them, and packaging and shipping and product delivery and all the rest of it. She was even subcontracting parts of it out to other people because she couldn't get enough people working with her. Most of it was going to the US. I was absolutely amazed by the productivity, the entrepreneurial chutzpah, I call it. She did it. She created an opportunity where you never would have imagined it. The reality is that manufacturing, though, often takes capital, sometimes a lot of it, and you really need the right product and you need the right sales process. And I should say that manufacturing isn't always necessarily the right thing. When I started my cabinet business, I looked at a large capital required to set up a shop, buy all those expensive tools, and I hesitated, and then I started to explore, and I looked around at some wholesale options, and I went through all the possibilities and did all the math, and I eventually discovered that clearly I could buy cabinets wholesale cheaper than I could make them, and I concentrated on a competitive sales markup and an installation charge. So I had a great volume manufacturer with lots more choice than I probably would have made myself, a timely supply, a great price, and it worked extremely well. But the key here is that you really need a good supplier relationship. And for me, it wasn't the first supplier, it wasn't even the second. It was the third supplier that I finally connected with that really made my business. And I could concentrate my team on good sales and perfect installations while upselling additional renovation work. I just simply couldn't manufacture the stuff for the same price that I could buy it, and I could focus on the wholesale side of it, or on the retail side. So there are opportunities, but you have to be nimble. You have to look for the right thing. And yes, there's challenges. I mean, COVID clearly. Bloomberg recently put out a piece saying that 1 in 7 small businesses are now at risk. Geographically, Alberta businesses are at the highest risk of that, partly because we've not only experienced the pandemic, but we've experienced an incredible drop in oil prices, which is our primary export industry. And the arts and recreation and hospitality sectors will probably struggle the most as well. There will be real challenges there because they struggle with the COVID requirements and those kinds of things. So there are opportunities, but there are challenges. Tech creates opportunities. Tech also creates obstacles. I mean, there's a lot of traditional type businesses. I've had people in my office struggling, they're losing their retail because it's all going online and they can't get people to come in. Well, tech creates opportunities. It also creates challenges for others. Regulation is one of the huge challenges that businesses face, both municipal, provincial, federal, and even international. Business regulation is a cost to small businesses. I just today went back and pulled out a copy of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business talking about the cost of government regulation to Canadian business. The cost of government regulation to Canadian business, they calculate at $36 billion in 2017. I doubt that it's changed much since then. And tragically for small businesses, it's on an employee basis, per capita per employee basis, it's 5 times higher for small businesses than large businesses because they can't spread it out over as many employees. So the cost of red tape is a huge challenge to doing business. In 2017, for companies with fewer than 5 companies, it was running about $6,750 a year for a small business to just comply with filling out government paperwork at all 3 levels, comply with regulations, to buying specific equipment, to hiring professionals, particularly accountants and professional fees that often get triggered by this. And so this also is one of the challenges of small business that is definitely quantifiable. and one of the things that we've been trying to address and try to reduce. So let's move on. How's the time doing? Where are we at? I don't know. Let's look quickly. Oh, we're good. I'll wrap up really quick here. Let's talk about the right person. The right person to succeed in some of these opportunities. The person with the right vision, the right energy will succeed. And I want to refer you to my favorite, most recent book on business. I read quite a few of these over the years. This one was published in 2018. Burn the Business Plan by Carl Schramm, who used to run, former president of the Ewing Myron Kaufman Foundation in the U.S. It's literally one of the leading centers for entrepreneurial research and teaching. And while the title is kind of tongue-in-cheek, I mean, yeah, he makes an argument that there are some points to be said there. There's a lot of other really good stuff in the book. And what he really focuses on are what do great entrepreneurs actually do that makes them successful. And he tackles some of the myth and fantasy that's out there. He begins by sort of debunking a couple of very popular myths. The first one is that written business plans are the key to a successful business. He says, nope. But you have to read the book to get it all. And then he says that the chances of a startup success improve if there are, the second myth, sorry, is that the chances of a startup successfully are improve if they're incubated in a supportive ecosystem. Again, he says, well, no, probably not. He says the research actually shows that the more widely these precepts are followed, the fewer new companies result. He didn't really go into some of the other possible reasons why why new business startups are declining across North America. But anyway, that's his point of view. Business plans, and I do kind of agree with this, business plans are for angel investors and your bank, debt financing. They really arose to serve the purpose of helping investors decide whether or not you had a good plan and a good vision that they should bother to invest in. But the reality is that the majority of new business owners don't use them, never did use them. Almost all of the high-tech startups never had a business plan. They just took off. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan, actually, because planning will force you to do your due diligence, which I think is extremely important, and it will help you sell the idea to investors if you need to do that. But the reality is the majority of small businesses don't actually need investors. In fact, I think I skipped over a line from the Canada stat. Only 25% of businesses actually seek angel investors. The rest of them are bootstrapped. They finance themselves along the way. They take out a mortgage on their house. They do whatever they have to come up with the money. So I say to you, plan, but here's the point. Don't expect the plan to lead the way. Plans have to change. They have to change a lot because only the market or customers and opportunity can actually, in the end, really lead the way. Kaufman Foundation says that businesses never evolve according to a set plan. I'll tell you a couple of quick stories. First one's from my own life. I had written a business plan because I wanted a line of credit at the bank to fund my wholesale purchases, cabinets, and I got that set up. I wrote the business plan. It was all a good experience. But the business plan didn't include what actually happened, a big piece of it. One day I walked into a real estate office. So I was always watching the market, and I was always looking for a possible house to buy and renovate and flip, and we did some of that kind of stuff. And I walked in and the agent said, well, I just got somebody come in and put this bare piece of property up for sale. I don't suppose that would interest you. And I said, well, tell me about it. I literally, inside of 10 minutes, put an offer on that piece of property. It's an opportunity that jumped at me. I never saw it coming. It was not in my business plan to be a land developer, but I bought that piece of property because I instantly recognized an opportunity. I was able to go to the city, go through all the process, and I divided it into 5 lots. I was able to sell each of those lots for almost the same price after a bunch of expenses, of course, that I paid for the original property. But, you know, being a subdivider, being a land developer wasn't part of my business plan. It wasn't even part of what I ever intended to do. But it is something that I kind of understood. I knew the market, and when change comes at you, when an opportunity comes at you, when change happens, throw out the plan or write a new one. Because if you're not nimble in business, you won't succeed. Let me tell you another story about Rolexes and $20,000 high price one-off speakers in the US. In other words, high-end products. For decades, there's been a massive influx into the US, billions of dollars a year worth of knockoff, fake, Chinese and other countries creating fake products, and it costs literally billions of dollars for the authentic product. Purchasers don't know if they're buying the real thing or not. And so my son in California set out to create a blockchain provenance record of the manufacturer of high-end products. It was going to save billions for people. It would cut out the fake industry. They were going to do this on a blockchain portal where the product gets registered. They put a digital RF chip in it that's embedded right in the thing, so you have to destroy the product to get it out. They spent about a year and a half looking at different options, talking to different people, writing software for it. But you know, the demand just didn't seem to be there. And then all of a sudden one day they heard about something that they totally didn't see coming. They had no idea this was an option. The US government put into place a set of legislative rules that were going to require that at the time it was like 7 years out or 6 years out, by 2023 anyway, the entire manufacture, warehousing, sale, and return of prescription drugs in the United States has to be tracked continually and totally. And my son realized that what they were creating for high-end products actually worked for a completely different product, drugs. They know nothing about pharmaceuticals. What they are is software people. He has 50 software engineers who are working for it. Chronicle.com, you can look it up, has become probably the leading developer of the software that is going to supply the drug companies. They've got 24 or 5 of the leading drug manufacturers and wholesalers as partners, a bunch of other industry players as part of their team. It's customer demand that will lead you to success. And don't blame the customer if they don't like your dream, if they don't want to actually buy it. You need to go where the demand is. You need to know where the interest is. You need to reimagine the dream. And almost the Kauffman Foundation talks a lot about this, how so many businesses start out in one direction and end up in a completely different place. But that's where they learn to succeed. So it's important that you set a plan, but boy, you need to be willing to rewrite that plan, to reimagine. And a lot of research has backed that up. I won't go into that. Here's probably the most important thing I can tell you tonight. Be alert, think on your feet, it's a dance. Plan, and then pivot, and then pivot, and then pivot. The only way to learn this is by experience. Theory is literally only half the game. Knowledge has to be matched by execution. That's why they call them in the corner office chief executive officers, because they know how to execute on the plan. It literally just takes street smarts. It's a gut instinct. That's what really leads to success in business. Kauffman points out the reality is, though, that the average successful investor is not a young male Silicon Valley whiz kid, in spite of the fact that they get all the media attention. Listen to this quote. Most engineers never went to college, entrepreneurs never went to college. Most didn't start their companies until they were well along in their careers. The average entrepreneur is nearly 40 years old when he launches. More than 80% of all new companies are started by people over 35 years old. More entrepreneurs are between 45 and 50 than any other cohort. And entrepreneurs over 55 create more businesses than those under 35. And another surprise, the chances of a new company surviving rises with the age of the entrepreneur. It takes knowledge and it takes experience, execution experience. So working for someone else is actually a really good place to learn. It can be a de facto school of business if you think about it that way, and if you're watching and wanting to learn. So let me end with just a couple of comments on some of the current government resources that are there to help you. And let me say that government offices are there to help you. If you can't find what you need, contact my office. My staff will help you get in touch with them. My office number is 782-7725. Please don't hesitate to phone. So what we've done most recently to try and spur Alberta's economic recovery is to appoint an Economic Recovery Council. Dr. Jack Mintz from University of Calgary is the chair of that, to help us create a bold and an ambitious plan with a long-term strategy to build and create an environment that will not only create tens of thousands of jobs, but do it by supporting business growth. So yes, we're doing lots of things directly by government, but the most important thing we're doing is to try and create an ecosystem where business who hires people, who is the economic engine of this country, as we said at the beginning, where they will be able to succeed and move ahead and grow and prosper. So we're putting money into roads and schools and all these core infrastructure, but the reality is most of that money is going out in contracts to individual companies. We're seeking to diversify the economy to attract investment to Canada, to Alberta, in lots of different ways. The reality is that as Albertans, we came together to save lives, and I think we need to also save livelihoods, and that's what we're working toward. So some of the specific things we've done, the job creation tax cut creates the most competitive business environment in practically North America. We're seeking to cut red tape as much as possible. We've created Investment Alberta, which will attract investment. We've invested in some oil and gas things. We're building infrastructure, $10 billion worth of infrastructure. And another municipal strategic transportation program, another $50 million, $150 million to water and wastewater partnerships. All of these will be delivered through business, and there's opportunity there to engage in those business things that are happening. We're working to diversify the economy through a whole bunch of different things. So we're doing as much as we can to enrich the business environment, because we believe that the only way to get out of our debt is to grow our way out. You can't cut enough to pay the debt, but you can grow the GDP. And because we do that, because we believe that for the most part, government should create a fair set of rules in which government can thrive, business can thrive, and then get out of the way and let business do what they do better than government does, which is to create employment and prosperity for all. And so I think I'll leave it at that. I think we'll have some time for questions if that's appropriate. And is somebody gonna share the questions, or how are we gonna do that?
We're going to do it in full. There are people who are asking questions in the chat.
Okay.
And there is, and then that, and she will be reading the questions. And there are people, maybe a couple of them, we can take
Okay.
we can unmute and ask the questions.
Good.
And we can take questions on the floor as well. Maybe I should open that with questions. Oh, the team wants to go first?
No, this was running if they're in the chat.
Okay.
Not yet.
I was listening to you, and what you were saying was a lot of that was very rich. Thank you so much for your presentation. One of the very old debates in the world of business is whether you change the market or the market change you as a business.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that is a very old discussion of change where it is with the body of conversation, and you were talking about rewriting the business plan, and it just put in perspective the idea of being flexible. Because create a business to serve the market.
Yeah.
At times, it's one way to change the market.
So which changes which? You know, I really think it's a dance. I think, I mean, clearly, an individual can sometimes change the market through new innovation, through totally new approaches to doing things, and dominate a market. But on the other hand, boy, if you're not paying attention to what the world's doing out there and what customers want and what the world needs, they'll pass you by so quick, it's unbelievable. So I think it's a dance. It's it's a real symbiotic relationship. I need business, business needs me.
Dr. Miguel?
Ron, is there a convenient place on the Alberta government website where there's a listing of government programs that, because sometimes they seem to be hard to find, and there's a way you can tell that students know where they can go to find sort of listing of government programs that can be appropriate.
Yeah, you know what? I wish I could tell you that there was that simple one-stop shop. It's one of the things that we've talked about that we are going to try and create. Unfortunately, every different government department is doing their own thing, and they all have their own page in the overall labyrinth of websites, so it does sometimes become a labyrinth. The one thing I would say is if you're having a problem finding what you need to find, please don't hesitate to call, because that's what my office staff are there to do, is to help you find those places where you're trying to go, help you interpret, explain, understand some of that stuff. And so we will try to help you do that as much as we can.
Thank you.
Question on the floor. So you mentioned the statistics that are that surprises me because that has me by leadership.
So if
you said a stat, you mentioned that 50% of
Yeah.
businesses
yeah.
in Alberta. Is that due to just COVID, or is a normal attrition rate?
I think that's normal. I'm not sure how COVID would have altered those figures. I mean, stats are rarely right up to the moment. So yeah, that would be the normal state of affairs. Yeah.
And I'm looking at my students with your shy. Yes.
They're being quiet.
You have one?
Nope.
Okay. You can ask questions on the chat, or if you want to just raise your hand for Zoom, we will see that and we'll take your question. Do I see a hand? No, I cannot see the second page because second page.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So is there a special government program to attract new investors in this time?
Yes.
We talk about the long term.
Yes. Yes. So we've created a new department just recently with the intent of expanding Alberta's presence around the world by creating international offices. We're following a model that Quebec has championed for a long time. They've always done that. I think Manitoba has begun to do some of it as well. But in many cases, and of course the federal government does, but too often Alberta never gets mentioned in those situations. And so we're joining in with some of those offices. In some cases, we're creating new offices in different parts of the world, targeted places of the world that will benefit, with the intent of selling the Alberta story, selling the Alberta opportunities, and inviting investment into Alberta. So that's rolling out now. Of course, these are the kinds of processes or works that take time to bring about results. But we're hopeful that with the tax cut, the reduction of some of the red tape issues, the reputation that Canada has around the world, that we will actually succeed in bringing a significant amount of investment back into Alberta that will create jobs and will help us to continue to lead the Canadian economy. I think there'll be about a dozen or 15 of those offices eventually.
So around the Canadian embassies abroad, where special offices of the office.
Yeah, exactly. So I know Japan, China, I think England and Germany, the U.S. of course, Mexico. I'm running out of. I don't remember the others, but there's a whole list of sort of Canada's primary trading partners where we feel like we might be successful in making further progress.
So there is another question of this stuff, but you did mention that the small businesses, less micro businesses.
Micro, 5 employees or less.
Yes, and I have some stats as well. I'm not going to mention them, but in terms of how they are driving the economy.
Yes.
And you mentioned a lot of opportunities in the province. So if a new entrepreneur were to come into Alberta now, what would be the sector, the most vibrant sector that would?
Well, a few years ago, I would have said some spin-off related to oil and gas, but that's probably not the reality at the moment. I think that I would say at the current time, it would be something in the agriculture or agri-food sector. There is a lot of activity in that right now. We have a couple of research centers and even incubators, Edmonton, Lethbridge, that are facilitating that, and there's a lot of growth potential in that. I mean, even what I mentioned, Alberta Milk is doing here on the south side of Lacombe. That's another aspect of that. I would say probably the agriculture, agri-food industry is in many ways the most vibrant right now. But at the same time, there's a lot of tech stuff going on that people don't realize. It's very specialty and niche, but there's a lot of activity happening there. You know, the digital stuff related to tech. I think there's a huge potential as well. There's been a huge change in the world marketplace for digital media. You know, with the advent of Netflix and Apple, whatever they call it, the Apple streaming thing. The demand for media by those guys is huge. Alberta has one of the most sought after geographies of anywhere in North America to be able to do filming and create movies. I mean, we've got some big blockbusters. We could have a lot more. And of course, Alberta we have more awards for movies than any other province in Canada, even though we don't produce as many as some of the other provinces. So there is a huge opportunity there as well, and a vast amount of money in the world economy for digital media.
So I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
So the first question is from Angelica, and she asks, what is your favorite part about the work that you do?
Oh, wow, I love my job. You know, it's actually almost this. It's the fact that I get to meet all of these very creative, entrepreneurial, energetic, visionary people, hear what they're doing, learn what they're doing. I've met more people and learned more things in this job than I have anywhere else. And there's such a vibrant, creative human spirit out there amongst people. So many good people doing such amazing things. That's what I probably get the most excited about.
And Rochi asks, how costly would exporting be for small businesses, and how effective is it for them?
How costly is it for exporting? That depends a lot on where you're exporting and what you're exporting, of course. What was the second part?
How effective is it?
How effective is it? Well, you know, for the right price, it's complex because you're working across barriers, and anytime you have to work across barriers, it gets complex. So, for instance, my son, when he did his PhD at Stanford in the engineering department, his work focused on trying to answer the question: why do the majority of large multinational construction projects either end up costing way more than they were originally projected, or in fact, a majority of them actually fail completely? Why? Because you're crossing barriers of culture, of language, of business practice, of regulation, and it gets confusing to try and understand all of these things, and especially when you get in an environment where you got 3 different banks from 3 different countries and 5 different contractors from 5 other different countries. And they all bring their own perspectives to it, and nobody understands the other ones, and it just creates chaos. So how effective is it? It's difficult, but if you'll take the time to learn the new culture, to learn the new practices, the new regulatory regime, the new ways of financing, the new ways of how a contract is written or not written, how important is peer pressure or cultural pressure. You have to understand all of these things. It can be very effective, but it's challenging. It's really interesting in that regard, but it's challenging.
That's all I have so far.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Go
So Ron, let me ask you something close to home. In your own riding, Ponoka, Lacombe, we tend to hear these debates that small businesses in Lacombe don't want Walmart and those other businesses to come to town because the big guys will collapse their businesses. Then the young people who graduate or who finish school here tend to go to the cities because there's nothing here. So is there a real fear amongst the small businesses or among the potential future business people in this writing? What can we do about it if that's the case?
Yeah, that's a really good point and a really real challenge and this is where I talk about the way the business environment changes. And when you've got something that kind of is working for you, you don't really want to have to change. You don't want your world changed. You don't want, I mean, everybody's like that, eh? But something else comes in and threatens you, and it can literally destroy your business. And so, yes, across the world, the small town challenge is to compete or survive in the face of the bigger corporate stores that come in with more services, more products, cheaper price, better buying power so they can outbuy you. Their supply chain is cheaper. It squeezes you out of business. So it is a challenge, but I hear it, and it's happened right here in Lacombe. Some small businesses who have lost. One lady told me, I'm shutting my business down because the people come here and they look at my stuff and they want to check it out, and then they go online and buy it online because they can get it for a little bit cheaper, but they maybe need a little bit more, and so they come back and buy 1 or 2 little bits from each. I can't survive on that. She said, I can't survive in this world. They won't buy from me. So it is a huge challenge to be able to innovate. That's why I think that you probably are not going to be able to, on the retail front, fight the migration to the digital world, to the online sales. You're going to have to join them. I think there is room for small, neat boutique stores with a very special product, but it's going to have to include an online presence. I just don't see how it's possible to survive anymore without joining the online world. For some people, that's more than they want to do. It is a threat to them. So yes, these are very real challenges to small business.